Professor Gregory Golda here at Sacred Heart University in the Martiri Center for the Liberal Arts. I am happy to present to you today Mr. J. Ignaszewski, who's a longtime Hollywood editor and producer, and we're going to have a little conversation about his history and what he's worked on, and that's going to be the episode. And we're going to do 2 episodes today, which is going to be great, and we're going to talk a little bit about the technology of editing and how that's changed over the years. So welcome, Jay.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Appreciate being here.
It's wonderful to see you again. You were teaching for us for a while.
Yeah, I did. I taught After Effects, and I think I taught beginning cinema. Yeah.
Right.
Up in the barn, I believe you referred to it as. It was quite...
it was a different place.
Different place, much different. Yeah, it's much impressive, yes.
Yeah, here at the Martiri Center, we've got a lot more studio space and a lot more access to the gear.
Do you get a nickel each time you say Martiri?
I might. They give me a private bathroom.
Ooh, keys.
So let's talk a little bit about what got you into the Hollywood scene. How did you first decide that you were going to work in movies? Were you thinking in front of the camera or behind the camera?
Behind. Really, I had, as a kid, I had a camera. I had an 8mm camera, and it was one of those things that, I sort of got involved in just taking home movies, catching. I enjoyed going to the movies, Saturday afternoon matinees at a quarter, 50 cents. I didn't realize there was a history of cinema in the background of my family until I actually went to film school. It turns out my grandfather and his brother had gone west from New Jersey to work at Max Sennett Studios. His brother was a still photographer, did Bathing Beauties and Max Sennett comedies. That's where
Max Sennett, of course, is Chaplin's home.
Chaplin's home, and also Our Gang comedies, yes, and Keystone Cops,
right.
And Bathing Beauties. That was a biggie then also. And my grandfather was a plasterer, plastered sets. He did Mary Pickford's home, Pick Fair, and hated L.A., hated Hollywood, hated everything about it. So my mother was born there, and when they went back. So I didn't know any of this until I was already in graduate school at film school.
And where did you go to film school?
San Francisco State.
Okay.
When I was in the military, I was getting out. I wanted to go to film school, and I figured if I'm going to go to film school, I'm going to go to the West Coast because that's where they make movies. And so I applied at USC, UCLA, and San Francisco State, and not realizing how hard it was to get into any of those, to just in the film department. Usually you had to go there as an undergraduate in the arts, and then you could apply and compete to get in.
But you didn't do that.
I didn't do that. I was accepted at all 3, not knowing how difficult it was. But the reason I chose San Francisco State is because I couldn't afford USC or UCLA. I was going on GI Bill, which is like $170 a month. I think I was getting married with a child. Yeah, that was going to be prime times.
Different economy back
Different
then.
economy, right? So I was accepted at San Francisco State. I went there, and I knew I needed to work part-time. So I took a part-time job at the film department, repairing equipment. Film equipment, the equipment that we actually used in the department, as well as went to school full-time. So it was busy days, usually carried a full load. It turns out at my film school at San Francisco State, they taught people how to teach people how to teach people how to teach people about film. They didn't really work in film. Now, we had great equipment. We had 16mm Aeroflexes, 16mm Eclairs. We had Nagra recorders, which was top-of-the-line audio recorders. We had lighting, full Mo Richardson lighting packages, and we had a mix studio that I happened to wire with the other engineer that worked there. We put it in and installed it. It had dubbers and recording. I think we had a 12-channel in, so we could handle 6 tracks, 8 tracks easily, 8 separate individual mag tracks. So it was a pretty going concern. But at the school there, this was in San Francisco, the Bay Area. At the time, there were 3 studios that were active in town. There was American Zoetrope, which was Francis Ford Coppola's company, and they were pretty much a closed network of people. There was Fantasy Films, which was Saul Zantz's company, and there was Lucasfilm, small group across in Marin County. And
now, what year are we talking about here?
We're like the 70s, 71,
Yes.
70, early 70s, mid 70s.
This is pre-Star Wars.
Pre-Star Wars, yes. No, just when Star Wars moved up from Southern California, ILM, when George moved his headquarters up. That's when it came up. So I went to all 3 studios and said, would you be interested in interns from the school? And they all went, yeah, this would be great. Free help, we don't have to pay them.
Right.
They get credits, all the rest of it. So I went back and did the presentation to the school, said this is what we ought to do. And they went, no, we don't want to do it because we don't want to be perceived as a trade school. So I got a little upset. So my partner in school there and I took the jobs ourselves. So we ended up working freelance in the world outside of school, as well as I worked on all the students' films because I knew how to work the equipment. They would take advantage of me.
That seems to be the key to your success too, is knowing the gear.
Knowing the gear and being familiar and being comfortable with it and not being frightened by it. Just equipment. I mean, I worked on F-4 Phantom jets in the military. So it worked on missile systems, airborne weapon systems. So I'm not scared by another.
Which is just like cameras.
Just like cameras. It's, computers then in the military at that time were tubes.
Right.
So you've got tube computers controlled by vacuum tubes that are pulling 4 to 6 Gs. They don't last very long. So anyway, the technology was like way woefully behind times. So we took the jobs. We did a lot of freelance. One of my instructors actually had some part-time film experience, and he worked at Fantasy Films. And he took me, got me some gigs over at Fantasy, and one of the first ones that I'd had over there was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
The Jack Nicholson.
Now I'm going
Oscar-winning film.
5 Oscars. Yeah, I joke everything from that point on was downhill. Never did as well again. Anyway, that's not true. But so I'm working full-time, working half-time at San Francisco State. I'm going school full-time, and then at night I'm going to the night mix. So we had 2 crews doing audio mix. During the daytime, we had a gentleman named Mark Berger who was doing the dialogue and music, and at night, Bill Mumford was doing the effects, and I was his assistant on that. So we would mix all night, and then next morning I'd go back to school. So we did that for 5 weeks. It was great. I learned a lot about what sound should be doing for film, how you control it. Now remember, this is the days when it's only optical track.
Meaning,
optical is just a stripe of optical that expands and contracts. You know when you have the countdown when you're seeing a movie nowadays and it goes 10, 9, 8, 7, and it goes to 2. When you hit the 2, it's a beep.
Right.
That's to check to see if the film's in sync.
Sync beat. Yeah.
Because the projector head's up here with the image, and down here is the sound reader, and that's 26 frames difference. So the beep is at the 2. So the beep's down here and the picture's up here. So the sound is always going to be ahead of the picture.
Right. So the optical track is actually basically 2 stripes on the side of the visual film.
Visual film. It was 1 stripe until Dolby came along and made it 2 stripes optical stereo, because they could cancel the noise out using Dolby stereo.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and Dolby was across the bay in San Francisco, so they would use our studio as testing. Now, at the time at Fantasy when we did Cuckoo's Nest, it was strictly a Langevin mix board. I think it only had 24 in or 12 in, and mixing. So it was very crude, very rudimentary. And we mixed it in a big room called Studio A. And the mix console was on wheels. We'd roll it out in the center of the room. Mm-hmm. The projectors were upstairs that shone through double glass on a screen. And during the day, they would mix for dailies, but the rest of the time they recorded things like Woody Herman's Thundering Herd, which was a big jazz group. So this was Fantasy. Film wasn't their primary concern. It was secondary.
They were music.
They were music. They were a record
company.
Yeah, Fantasy, Prestige, Milestone, Galaxy, and Stax. I keep remembering. 28th and Parker. You knew you were dicey because there were something like 24 corporations that pyramided back to a boat that was in the Caymans. The address was 26th and Parker in Berkeley.
It's a multi-level.
Multi-level.
Yeah.
Yeah. So freelancing school, I think it's film school. When at Fantasy, we did things like Three Warriors was a low-budget film that Keith Merrill directed. Learned a lot about sound on that one, so I got some tall tales on that one for sure. Saul Zaentz also owned the J.R.R. Tolkien estate. So he owned all the Lord of the Rings. He owned Lenny Bruce's works.
And people would still know that Lord of the Rings because it's the animated one from the 70s.
Right, but he also still owned it when they did it live action.
Peter
The animated
Jackson,
version was directed by Ralph Bakshi, a most unpleasant person, and it was all shot live action and rotoscope to animation. So when we were mixing it, we're mixing it against guys moving against green screen. There's no environments, there's no background. We don't know if they're walking on stones or grass, whether there's water in the background or wind blowing or trees. We're just mixing it's like a radio show, truthfully.
Right.
And so that was unpleasant. But they actually at one time, this was during the Lord of the Rings was during the disco was huge, disco music. And everything was going disco. And I'm joking one day because Leonard Rosenman did the soundtrack for the Lord of the Rings animated version. And I'm walking down the hall, I'm hearing the music, and I jokingly said, when's there going to be a disco version of it? And bigger than life, 10 days later, they were releasing a disco version on one of those vinyl albums with the pressed image from the animation feature in it. And it was the first time in record industry history that they got back more albums than they shipped.
Oh, Lord of the Rings disco, not too popular.
It was really not too popular. After that, after fantasy, I sort of drifted around, did a lot of freelance work, and then went to work for a group called Cinerents, which was a post-production. It was a production studio stage. It had a 60 by 40 foot continuous cyc. We shot everything from Peterbilt trucks to Skipper's Fish and Chips. But we had trucks, we had generators, we had lighting packages, we had camera packages, Aeroflex, all 35 millimeter, Eclairs, and also Panavision.
That's truly the big league at the time.
Panavision was huge. Panavision, you don't own Panavision, you only rent them, and there were very few independent Panavision rental houses. We also did Tyler mount, which was the kind of mounts that you used on motorcycles and cars and boats and helicopters.
Right.
So I became a certified Tyler mount operator, which means I was hanging out of a lot of Bell Jet Rangers photographing, which was great fun. I spent 2 weeks in Tarzana going through the Panavision school, learning how to work on their cameras. Saw the Panaglide, the rip-off of the Steadicam that Gottschalk, who was owned Panavision at the time. Panavision got a Academy Award, a Technical Achievement Award for the Panaflex, which was this really great lightweight 35 millimeter camera, shoulder mount. You could carry a 1,000-foot mag on the back. It was beautiful. And Gottschalk refused the award. He said, when you send me a real statue, a full statue, not a technical achievement, I'll accept it. Well, eventually next year they gave him one.
Wow.
So I think guts ball. But Cinerents gave me an opportunity to do a lot of commercial work, high-end commercial work, things with like Virginia Wade doing tennis after she won Wimbledon, a lot of Ford commercials, Toyota commercials. And we also worked on a lot of features when we support the cameras. To rent a Panavision, you had to have $1 million insurance for it daily. And that was like $68. I thought that was amazing. I get $1 million worth of insurance. But anyway, I was an assistant like on shoots for commercials, but also The Last Waltz. I was the camera assistant, and all I did was load magazines in the dark. And we had we built a dark room in the backstage, and I just loaded mags. Rumor has it that they spilled more Coke in that changing room than it was actually film shot, but I don't know anything about that.
And not the soft drink we're talking about.
Not the soft drink.
Yeah.
Then it was back to fantasy. They picked me up again, and this time they were in the throes of building a new building, a new 7-story building. Saul was going to expand, and we know it was an interesting change that was going to happen because the 6th floor was going to be strictly for the IRS because the company, being a music company, was constantly being audited.
Not IRS records.
No.
The federal government
yes,
sending IRS agents because...
Income Revenue Services, yes. And so that was the 6th floor. Well, you knew you were in trouble when you had 4 lawyers that managed the company, and you had something like 20-some corporations that pyramided back to the boat in the Caymans. Anyway, so we were going to build a new screening room, and I convinced Saul to build a mix facility to take over the 2nd and 3rd floor. and we built a state-of-the-art mixing post-production facility. We could do ADR, dialogue replacement. We could do Foley. We had a Foley stage built into it. And we had the first cinema board, a mix console that was built for mixing cinema for film. So it was going to take into account the coming advent of digital sound, because our frequency response was 0 to 20,000, which is the audio range.
Human hearing, right?
Human hearing.
Let me ask you about this Harrison console as we're looking at it here. It's sitting inside this room. You said there's a Foley stage up under the screen. It seats about 55 people. So this is where really the film is coming together. This is the nexus of production, where you're looking at all of the first cuts of the film.
You're looking at the finish there. You're at the finish.
You're past that.
The cut's all done. The picture's supposedly locked. Maybe latched, but most of the time it's
locked. And now
locked.
it's all sweetening.
Now it's putting all the pieces together. You've had the dialogue that came from the location, from the actual sync sound. You've done maybe some dialogue replacement for those sounds because of background noises or illegible, or also you might not have liked the dramatic reading. You might have them reread it. For a film like Wolfen, with Albert Finney, they couldn't figure out whether they wanted him to have a Boston accent, a New York accent, or strictly a plain white bread American accent. Now he's English, so we did all three versions, and the director really didn't know what he wanted, but Albert Finney knew how to do it, so it was really interesting. So you've got the positions that we're looking at on the board there. There's three positions: dialogue on one side, in the middle is music, and on the right-hand side is effects. So dialogue is the actual sync sound, maybe ADR. Music is obviously the music tracks, whatever they're recorded from. Most of the time it's a 24-track feed. And then effects, which are crickets, winds, rains, fire, the rest of it.
Right, and I think what we're seeing here in this image is 4 gentlemen sitting at the table.
Absolutely, and so from the closest in the foreground is Bill Mumford, who's dialogue mixer. Old World Mixer from Hollywood, started Producer Sound Service, which was an independent sound post-production facility in L.A., one of the first. Next to him is a fellow named Steve Starkey, producer. Came from, he and Dwayne Dunham and myself were George's assistants when we worked at Lucasfilm. But I knew Stark from this project, Steve Starkey. He went on to do Who Framed Roger Rabbit and all the films that they did there. Next to him is Bobby Minkler. Bobby is a music mixer, used to sing with Nat King Cole's backup group. Bobby was a mixer on Urban Cowboy and also won an Academy Award for music mixing on the first Star Wars. And then yours truly at the other end. Hair darker, mustache a little longer. We're mixing making of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which I worked on the post-production on that, editing as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so if on to the next one, and after I left fantasy, I got sort of roped into the right stuff. They were going to do the visual effects. USFX was a company Gary Gutierrez started, and it was sort of motion movers. I was stage manager for that. I was responsible for the lighting and all the effects movement, the lighting of it, the motion control units. They had what was called the Crucifix, which was a big XYZ motion mover. Caleb Daschanel was the DP on that. I met, interesting group of people, but at one point, Ladd Productions, Alan Ladd Jr. was the executive producer from Ladd Productions, pulled the plug and said, we're going to rethink how we're going to do the effects, because we ended up starting to throw planes out of windows and using fire extinguishers to make smoke and cloud tanks to do all sorts of.
And it wasn't kind of cutting it.
No, they wanted that. They wanted that look. They decided to go that way. They didn't need to hire engineering. But in the interim, while they're deciding this, I'm not doing anything. So this is like a Monday or Tuesday. And Wednesday, I get a call from a friend of mine, Jim Kessler at Sprocket Systems, which was ILM's post-production sound, and said, we need a hand over here. I was wondering if you could help us out. So I said, sure. So I came over on a Friday, and they had 250,000 feet of 16-millimeter film behind-the-scenes footage of the making of Return of the Jedi. At that point, it was called Blue Harvest, Horror Beyond Imagination.
Which is the code,
which was the code.
the code name of the film. Yeah.
So what they wanted was to figure out how much it was going to take and how long it was going to take to sync all this footage up so they could start putting it together. So they asked me to sit down and go through it and see what I could figure out and give them an estimate. So I sit down, but when you're syncing up film and soundtrack, you're doing it. You know, you're doing the work. It's not just that I go through, okay, this is going to be hard, this is going to be easy, just do it later. You might as well do it. You're there. So I started marking, I started doing it. This is a Friday midday, and I worked through the weekend. Didn't sleep, just drank buku coffee and kept doing it. And on Monday morning, I was all finished. And they came in on Monday, and they said, well, what's it going to take? How much is it going to cost? They said, well, it's done. It's all finished. They went, no. So they hired me permanently until I had to leave. But I made myself leave. But I ended up being utility post-production. I ended up doing 2 weeks at ILM in visual effects for Jedi, and then 2 weeks in the editing room. At this point in time, principal photography was finished on Jedi, and they were just going to get ready to be screening the director's cut. Now, a director in DGA rules has 6 weeks after wrap or principal photography to show his version of the film to the studio. Mm-hmm. Studio was George in this case. So Richard Marquand was the director. His editor was Sean Barton. Delightful, both of them very delightful. They had done Eye of the Needle together before, so they were old friends. So George looked at their cut, said thank you very much, and sent Richard home. That was his contract. He was done. And then George sat down and we took the movie apart and started over, cutting, and actually shot additional scenes, effect scenes. But the room was intense, 7 days a week, 18 hours, 16 hours a day to get it done. Because when you get money to do a film, it's usually not your money, it's the bank's money. And at a certain point in time, a really heavy-duty interest rate kicks in. So if you don't deliver and hit the screen, the penalties are tough. And George, with the original Star Wars, it always opened right around Memorial Day in May, which is also about a week after his birthday. And also the day they released Star Wars was my birthday, so I thought that was apropos. But the room was, we had to wrangle 1,220 some effect shots. So your hallway at the cutting rooms were across the parking lot from ILM. So I'd be over at ILM putting shots together, and then I would come over to the cutting room. But the days I was dedicated in the cutting room, I was responsible first thing in the morning to updating the status of each of the visual effects shots. So 12 reels, 1,223 shots, they were spread over, so you saw the status. So there was sort of white for nothing, meaning a storyboard or a placeholder, black for black and white. Then you started to get color. So it was green, you saw a version, but keep going. And red means stop. It was final or CBB. CBB means could be better. If we have time, we'll go back to it. Yeah. So it was.
That's a great code.
It was interesting way to do things. They had a very unique computer system for tracking shots at ILM. So when the guys would go on the stage to shoot a miniature, they'd enter the shot number in the computer and what they were shooting, each of the elements. So you had a beauty pass, a light pass, an engine pass, a cockpit pass, a reflection pass, a matte pass, a shadow pass. So all these passes to make one element. So I worked on the shot, I think it was called SB-11, I'm not sure, Space Battle. When it broke down, there were over 464 elements to make the one shot. And the shot was less than 28 frames. Less than
wow.
It
30
was
seconds and all that.
Yeah, and I 24 frames a second. So I was like, I came up with this philosophy: there should not be more elements than there are frames in the shot. So it was quite complicated, and it was one of those things. People always say George was just lucky. That man worked really hard and has an amazing eye. And when we first showed that shot, and I had been working on it on an 8-perf VistaVision Moviola flatbed. You moved it through frame by frame. So I could see each element at all times. So there's also a matte pass and a garbage matte pass for each of these elements. So I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at it comps, test comps in black and white. So I'm seeing how the elements are moving. So the first time I show it, we run it on a loop in the projectors in dailies. So it runs, this one ran by itself because it was so complex. It went by the first time. And George goes, wait a minute. Goes by the second time and we stopped it. And someone said, what's wrong, George? And George says, there's a garbage mat that missed the light stand that goes through. I had been looking at it for weeks and didn't see it. He saw it the first time he saw the shot. So the man's got an eye. He definitely has an eye. So, you know, his ships should enter frames, ships should exit frame was the litany of stuff. Yeah, I was most proud I worked on the speeder bike sequence with all those passes. And there was, I do a little presentation on that of how many times I used the same shrub and the same tree going by to cover transitions and to change the direction and speed and views because I had all these cuts and not enough coverage for it. Yeah,
you must have liked to have seen the speeder bike troopers in the Mandalorian.
Yes, yeah, right. Yeah. So Lucasfilm we did a lot there. I mean, I ended up, you could only take credit for one aspect of the film that you worked on. You couldn't be credited for more than one thing. So I didn't get credit for sound. I didn't get credit for visual, for live action editorial. I got credit for visual effects editorial. But all the rest. And when I was usually done, I came in at 6 o'clock in the morning to do dailies. Now, dailies at the time were being done by a lab in Seattle called Alpha Cine. I think it was Alpha Cine. And Seattle was notorious for having the best weather in the world, right? Yeah, my sitting arrangement. Anyway, invariably I'd get in the morning and the dailies wouldn't be there because they hadn't made the flight because the Seattle-Tacoma airport was socked in. The film couldn't get out or couldn't get in. So I was going crazy, and I said to George, and you don't send it to L.A. You don't do that. George is not an L.A. person, besides the fact it's stupid. They put you at the end of the list. Visual effects. Remember, a shot's less than a foot. This piece of negative that they're going to be processing. That's a pain in the ass for a studio or for a lab to run that short ends. But even if you make, 6 or 8 passes for it, matte passes, green screen, all the rest of it, it's still, you're going to have maybe less than 10 feet of film to be processed. So you're getting all these little nibs and nabs that you're going to process. So anyway, the lab I had used when I was in film school was called Monaco Labs. It was just 16 millimeter processing. And I had worked out a deal with them that they didn't charge me a lot of money. They would tack me onto somebody else's, and I would get, my little pieces would be done for my student films. I got my film for free from Kodak as a film student because they had a distribution plant over in the East Bay, and I lived in the East Bay. And I'd go by and get short ends, 16 millimeter short ends, film that had come off of a shoot where they bought a lot, didn't use it all.
Wow, that's amazing.
So Lucasfilm, like I said, we were 7 days a week, 16, 18 hours a day. And it was very secret. Your family didn't know what was going on. No one could come and visit you. So we put all the models and maquettes out in one day on the stages because Smithsonian had requested some of this stuff for their Air and Space Museum. So we had all of them laying out. My partner, myself, Dwayne Dunham, who's director now. Dwayne and I were out there filming this, and I went, why don't we do an open house? And so we did a weekend, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The families could come and see what we've been working on all these years. And it wasn't just a simple static display. Things had to move, lights had to come. So it was quite a production. So anyway, Lucasfilm was exciting. We did Raiders of the Lost Ark. We fixed Never Ending Story, which was a real pain.
Why is that?
They shot it in non-pin registered cameras. So when you're trying to composite 2 disparate images from 2 separate cameras, they don't lock in. So in frame to frame, internal,
make sense,
So when the film moves through an intermittent movement, which it does, it moves, opens, takes a picture, closes, moves, opens with the next frame. So if it doesn't pin, where the pull-down claw pulls it down, and 2 pins come in and pin it to hold it, then it doesn't drift. So the next one that goes over it. So Never-Ending Story, foreground elements, background elements, they were breathing against each other. So we had to hand track all the elements.
So you fixed it?
As well as we could. Kinda, yeah. Because it's.
Do you think you still see that?
Oh, you do.
Oh, you do?
You can see, especially in some of the sequences where the guys are against a big stone wall. It's got a face in it. You'll see it creeping a bit in the back. So that's a telltale on visual effects. Yeah, that's that was
That obviously
painful.
still annoys you a little bit.
It does, because it was such a simple thing, and someone cheaped out in production and didn't pay the rental fee for the PIN registered camera.
Yeah.
Panavision's PIN registered, Airflex is not. So, and Mitchell cameras, 8-perf VistaVision cameras, is what they use to shoot all the visual effects at ILM, because 8-perf gives you 4 times as much space as 4-perf 35, which runs vertically. 8-perf runs horizontally. Confusing as hell.
Yeah. Well, I know of that because of IMAX.
Yes,
and the way that IMAX works.
Yeah, and 70 millimeter comes in 5-perf and 15-perf.
Right.
So then you can get you can be all over the world with formats. Anyway, so Lucasfilm.
Yeah, tell us about Lucasfilm.
Yeah, it was challenging. We did lots of stuff on Raiders and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. They reinvented a lot of stuff is R&D. That's why it costs so much for visual effects, and especially in film, non-digital. Because how does lava look? How does water look? I mean, we showed a lot of VistaVision films from the 50s, Japanese adventure, earthquake, tornado type of films, to see how water moved, to see how the earth moved. And I stole one of the graphics from VistaVision off of that and made T-shirts at ILM. And we all had VistaVision T-shirts with ILM on the back, dark blue with a yellow VistaVision and a red outline. And Paramount owns VistaVision. That's their trademark. And so Frank Marshall, one of Amblin's producers, executive producers, wanted one of these shirts. I said, Frank, you can have one, but you can't wear it in LA, because if Paramount sees it, I'm going to be in big trouble. So I get a call from Paramount Legal about 2 weeks later. And I go, okay, I'm going to jail, or this is going to cost me. I'm never going to see the daylight again.
Oh my God.
And they were ordering T-shirts. So anyway, that was VistaVision. Yeah. So from there, Dwayne Dunham, one of the people George interviewed to direct Jedi was David Lynch, which would have been interesting to see how Jedi would come out with David Lynch. Anyway, but David and Dwayne met at the time, and Dwayne was the editor on Jedi for George. And David hired him to do his film coming up for that. But Orion Pictures, we were hired by Philip Borsos to do the Mean Season with Kurt Russell and Mary Hemingway. And we went down there. That was an interesting education and freelancing, because we ended up, the director vapor-locked, lost track of what he was doing, and we did such a good job salvaging the film. The whole long story for that one, that was fun. But that Orion then would hire Dwayne and I to go in and fix films. We became fixers for several years. We fixed films like Throw Mama from the Train, Cherry 2000, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Cherry 2000 was another, that one was not fixable. And one of the things about when they call you in to fix, they're already in, $14, $21 million or so in the film. So when you take a look at it and you quote them a price, they sort of have no choice. And so we were charging obscene amounts of money to Throw Mama from the Train. We didn't cut one scene. I sat there working on the world's most perfect latte in the espresso machine, and Dwayne on his tennis game. So I would book him tennis courts, and I would work on the coffee. And once a week we would have lunch with Danny DeVito and talk about music. It was like, but they paid us, and it was like, why would you? Anyway. So we did that for a while, and then I got roped into Amblin as a staff editor, making behind the scenes for Goonies and Young Sherlock Holmes, and that was heady, because I worked directly for Frank Marshall, one of the executive producers. Kathleen Kennedy was the other executive producer, and Steven Spielberg. So every day at 5 o'clock, I had to go to Frank's office and sit down and have a glass of wine and talk about my day, which most of my days consisted of waiting for either Kathleen or Frank or Steven to give me an opinion on the version I had just delivered to them. And that could take weeks. So I met people like Bill Murray and David Lean, and you hang out with that kind of people that are coming through. And it was like phenomenal, just a phenomenal time. And then I was there about a year, and my family still lived in Northern California in Marin County, in Sonoma County, I'm sorry. And I would go home on weekends, and it was getting to be a true task. Tried to convince my wife to come to Los Angeles with a family. She wanted no parts of LA. Sound familiar? And then I get a call from George's office asking me if I would consider coming back to work on Howard the Duck as the first assistant and visual effects coordinator. And they were all hot for me to do this because I knew how ILM worked. I knew how the visual effects worked. George knew I was a commodity he could trust and count on. So I said bye to Amblin, and Frank Marshall's parting shot to me was, "You're going to live to regret this the rest of your life." And Howard the Duck was one of those things that we did good work, but the movie didn't do so well, but the effects were well done. But It was a battle. Nobody at ILM, nobody wanted to work on that film. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. And they felt like they were forced into it because it was George's film. And there were lots and lots of things that were bothersome about it and battles that were fought and lost. But the one that I really was upset with was we auditioned a lot of voices, a lot of actors for the voices. And one of them was Robin Williams. And I was in the 8-hour session when he was doing the dialogue for it, the scene where Howard falls out of the sky and into the trash can in Cleveland and tries to figure out where he is, and he's talking to the girl. And so we have a script. I cut the sequence, and Robin's reading the script, and he does it. He does it great a couple times. And when you do an ADR, you're doing it on a 6-track recorder, a 35 millimeter 6-track. It's running on a dubber and the loop picture. And it'll record one. Then when you starts again, it just jumps automatically to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then if you go past 6, it jumps back to 1. So if you want to save one, you have to lock the record out. Anyway, so he did 1. He said he did 2. And then he says, can I riff? Can I just do some stuff? And he started doing stuff. And we were laughing so hard. We couldn't say cut. We couldn't stop the machine. And he just kept going. He just kept going. And I'm going, this is going to be the biggest hit anybody's ever seen. It's going to be so funny. It's going to be so outrageously good. He said, thank you. They said, thank you. He went home. His agent called the next day and said, Robin's not going to do it. And we all went, whoa, why? And he had just come off of Popeye.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be associated with another comic book character that looked like it was going to fail.
Oh, no.
Now, there's all these other stories told about all this other stuff. No, that was the one. I was there. I watched it happen, and it was like, but he was smart because a guy in a rubber, it was always going to be a guy in a suit. Always going to be a guy in a suit. Yeah.
But then he goes on to Aladdin.
Yeah. Well, but it's a voice, and it was still funny. It was still good. The movie was good. But anyway, Dwayne and I did a few more things. It was funny, a lot of repairs and stuff. I finally got the family to move to L.A., and the first gig I got when I moved to L.A. was in Northern California. So I was just pulling the refrigerator off the moving truck, putting it in the house, got on a plane the next day and went to Northern California to Marin County to work on Fly 2 for Brooks Films. That's where I got to know Mel Brooks. And
then Spaceballs.
Then, I did a few other things between Fly 2. Mel found out I'd never been to Europe, and so he took me to Europe when we did the music recording in Berlin, Bavarian Radio Philharmonic. That was great fun. And then we did a few other things in between that. Spaceballs came in. Well, that was Spaceballs. I was a second assistant. The main lead editor was Conrad Buff, and Conrad was the lead editor at ILM Post-Production Editorial, so I knew him from a long time. And Conrad would get behind during the week cutting, and so I would help out. We were old friends, so I would hang around, just shoot the bull, and then I would cut a few scenes for him. And then on Saturday, Mel would come into the cutting room to see what we had been doing. It was very genteel. It was very nice. But we'd get 20 minutes of how he'd never worked with an editor that knew what comedy was about. So, or it was like, he said, it was like, I've given you a baby and you've left it out in the middle of the field in the bright sun with a diaper on its head. You don't know what's going on. So one Saturday, we're showing our cut. Conrad's showing the cut. And Mel goes, that's it. I love it. You're finally getting it. And Conrad turns to me and goes, I didn't cut any of this. Jay did. So he moved me up to associate editor, and it was just great. So I had my own cutting room, my own assistant. I had my own couch, which Mel would come in and take his nap on the couch. And I was totally fascinated with his time on Show of Shows when they're doing live comedy, when he did 2,000-Year-Old Man. I mean, this, to me, was the best.
Yeah,
anyway, did that. It was great. I'm sorry I'm not involved in Spaceballs 2. I did offer my services. But if you notice, Mill never uses the same editor 2 times in a row. I don't know why.
Know that.
Yeah. But anyway, somewhere along there, Dwayne and I had done all these fixes on all these shows and everything. And Dwayne's on a Disney film called Incredible Journey, Homeward Bound. Mm-hmm. And he calls me. He says, look, I need you to come through. We're going to be screening the film. We're going to sneak it. We're going to, for audience feedback. And I want you to come in and do a pass through the film from top to bottom and do any tweaks and any changes you feel are necessary. I went, okay, good money. They had 5 editors working on the show. Now, these guys are all, Marcia Lucas is one of them, people that did all sorts of things. Anyway, so I come in, I do a pass, we go all the way through. Now, normally when you screen a film and then they do an audience survey, usually if you're in the 79 percentiles, low 80s, it's a hit, it's a go. We scored like 96%. And I'm going, walk away, just cut the neg, we're done. And Disney decided they want to get 100%. Now you can't, because you don't have the same audience. You don't even have the same relative humidity when you screen it the next time. Nothing's the same. You can't ask the same questions because you don't have the same people and they're not looking at it fresh. So I went, thank you, I'm going to go do something else. And I went to do something else. And 14 months later, they released the film finally. It was 2 seconds shorter than my version. And 2 scenes were flopped. Anyway, so that was enough of that for me. So it was, and Dwayne and I had a good time doing it because one of the things he always used to point out to me when I was his assistant, we were cutting, was I've only got the film that's in front of me. Don't point to me, don't point the script to me, don't point any, I only got this in front of me. So one of the times he's telling me about the script and everything, his scene, I turned around, I went, I've only got what's in front of me, Dwayne. I don't have anything else. He says, you've been waiting years to feed that one back to me.
Yeah. Right.
I went, yeah. So anyway, Dwayne and I have a long time. We went to film school together. We've known each other a long time. So it was second.
Let me take 1 second here. Okay. Whoever's got to leave can go, right? If anybody can stay, we could just keep the camera on Jay. Keep it running.
I'm almost finished.
They got to hop on shuttles and get to the next class.
Oh, yeah. Oh, cross campus.
Yeah. Okay, so are we still going?
Yeah, we're still recording, still rolling.
Okay, we've got a couple more things to get through and then...
Not that much.
Okay, do you want to start with Fox TV next? Jump into that next?
Sure, yeah.
Fox TV, yeah.
Let me ask that question and we'll go.
Yeah, whenever you guys are ready.
Okay. Okay, tell us a little bit about Fox TV.
That's that was the early days when it first started off. We did I was called in to do a episodic called Key West, starring Fisher Stevens. Clever little show, sort of, he thinks he's won the lottery, moves to Key West to write the great American novel, because that's where Hemingway's from, and turns out he didn't win. And so he's bereft, he has no money, he's stuck in Key West. So all these characters evolve. And now, cutting episodics, we were cutting those on an Ediflex, which was an 18 VHS machine system, but it was very clever because it was light pen editing. You basically had your line script, the line script in the production. You know what a line script is? It's you have the page of the script in front of you, and there's a person who does script continuity, and there's, say, scene 23, and you shoot that scene from top to bottom from a wide shot. So they get a line 23 down, and over here on the facing page, blank, they write 23 wide shot, top to bottom, right? In any particular shot with a 50, daylight, yada, yada, yada. Then they do a pickup or an insert or an alternate take or a single. That's a line script, another line that only covers the portion of the script that covers, with a description over to the left-hand facing page. So you had this line script, so all the dialogue's up there with all the lines that cover each of the sections, up on a screen. And you could take a light pen and go, I want to go from here to here to here to here, and it would do an assembly.
Wow.
On tape. It was great. And it was quick. It was really fast. So it normally takes 5 to 6 days to cut a 1 hour episodic. 1 hour is like 47 minutes.
What was it shot on?
It was shot on film and transferred to video. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I ever saw the film. I never touched film of that. And anyway, it usually was like 5 to 6 days to cut an episodic like that length, and I could cut it in about 3. and I was just snapping through it. So I think we did 13 episodes. I think I did 5 of them, which is, there were 3 editors. Everybody else fell behind. And I had one episode that came up as long as I could make it was 28 minutes. I didn't have anything else. I called and on episodics at the time, you never saw the director. He never talked to you. You just got the film and put it together. Script, and that's it.
It's a totally different industry.
Totally different.
For TV.
And I called the director, who was surprised that they heard from me. And I said, I don't have any, do you have anything else? He said, what do you mean? I said, I can't make it any longer. Well, there's got to be something. No, there's nothing else there. I can't redo people. I can't do, anyway.
Can't repeat it.
Can't repeat it. Basic premise is an alligator that's a pet at a bar escapes. So I went down this theme. The alligator's horny, had been locked up in this cage for years and wanted to get out to find a girlfriend. So I found all this stock footage of alligators and did a whole thing with trains through tunnels and fireworks going off. And the studio, Paramount, Fox loved it. Post-production, Hal Harrison just loved it. He just thought I hung the moon because I saved this film. But it was pretty terrible. It was pretty terrible. And the executive producer was a director also one of the episodes, and he was one of the only directors that came in. And we're doing something, and he said, why don't you do this, this, and this? And I said, well, that'll ruin this, and that'll take away from that and do all the rest of this stuff. And he said, are you arguing with me? I said, that's what we do here in editorial. It's just you and me. We're in a room. We can express ourselves, do stupid things, say stupid things, but out of it comes a better product, comes a better artistic solution.
How'd that go?
Turns out he had fired a couple editors who argued with him before, but I didn't know that, and I just went blithely on it, and I did the whole show. So anyway, that was enough of that. So I finished that, and I'm exhausted. I've just I'd just done a run of all sorts of heavy, intense, totally submerged, involved productions. And I got a call from someone says, look, there's these guys in town, and they're looking for someone. And when they describe what they want, we told them it has to be you. We has to be you. I said, well, who are these guys? They'll call you. They're going to call you. I went, okay. So this goes on. I hear this from a bunch of different people. And then finally I get this call, and there's these people from Luxor, Doug Trumbull's project. Doug Trumbull, who did 2001: A Space Odyssey, Close Encounters, Blade Runner. I mean, this is the guy. This is the visual effects.
Mr.
This
Science
is the guy.
Fiction, yeah.
He is the guy, right? And so I get called to this. I don't get to meet him. I get called to this hotel in Hollywood, and his co-director is there and his producer is there. And they tell me what this project's all about and everything. And I said, well, don't you have an editor on it now? And they said, yeah, we do, but she just doesn't understand what's going on. I said, have you had the conversation with her? They said, well, no, not really. I said, look, I'm an editor. And if I had a director who was having a problem and didn't tell me, I would feel really terrible. I mean, this is where you work it out, right? You have a conversation. And they said, well, if you did it, what would it cost us and all the rest of this? And I said, I just quoted an obscene amount of money. I didn't want any parts of it. So I just said this, and first class and a car and a house and all the rest of this stuff for 2 weeks of work, right? That was it. I wanted buku bucks, way much, too much. So they went, okay, thank you. We'll get in touch if we need you. I went, great. I went away. A couple of weeks later, I get a call. Well, we solved their problem. I said, oh, you did? What'd you do? We fired her. I went, yeah, that doesn't solve the problem. So I said, and they said, and we'll do your deal.
Huh.
So I go, I fly to the Berkshires. Is where they're filming. They're doing all the effects. This whole Luxor was this hotel in Vegas. So it's all this backstory of all this discovery and mystical stuff. There's a motion-based ride. There's a IMAX film. There's a show scan live thing scene. And so the part I'm supposed to do is fix this one short bit of safety ride type of thing, right? So I look at it and I say, I'll tell you what, guys, go away, leave me alone. Give me 5 days and I'll show you a cut version. If you like it, great, we'll finish it out. We'll finish the second week out. If you don't like it, no harm, no foul. You don't have to pay me. Just pay my fees, my overhead, and send me home. We're done. Okay, great. 13 months later, I finally get out of there at my obscene rate.
Nice.
They never renegotiate. And the first thing, Doug Trumbull comes in, he sits down, he introduces himself, and I said, okay, let's get a few things clear. I'm not working overtime. I've just come off of way too many. Oh, you don't have to do that. I'm not working weekends. I'm not. I said, when's your deadline? He told me when the deadline. I said, I'll have it done for you by the deadline. But, and you got to get used to hearing something you probably don't hear ever anyplace else. He said, what's that? It's the word no. I'm going to say that a lot. You're going to come in and say good morning. I'm going to say no. I'm just going to be contrary because we're going to get it done the right way, the way I did it. The challenge was this was going to be the first digital production, shot in film, VistaVision, and scanned digitally, scanned by Cinesite, who had just started this Kodak scanner, the Genesis scanner, $9 a frame. When I came in, they had already scanned the entire project at $9 a frame. Over $2.7 million in scanning charges.
Wow.
No way to play it back. They hadn't decided how to do that yet. We ended up having to get these IBM supercomputers, like PVMs, huge things. There were only 5 in the world. We had 3 of them. And the other 2 were earmarked for backup if we needed them.
Oh, my God.
Right now, they're good for sandwich warmers. They aren't good for anything else.
Right. Your phone's probably got more power right now.
Oh,
by far.
And we had to write software so we could composite shots. Anyway, put the digital image up. I do the cut. I'm doing the cut. I'm doing the cut on one of the first Avids. It's 92. One of the first Avids, which is not frame accurate and will not give you a good image. So it was terrible to work with. I had a whole team that was dragging film, conforming film to my digital cut along with it all the time. Doug, stay out. I'm not done. I'm not ready for you. Go away. When I showed my first cut, the producer was really impressed by the music track. Now I bring a bunch of music cues with me when I'm cutting. Elvin Silvestri, John, the whole 9 yards. I bring everybody I've used from big action movies and everything that I've not used, but people have used. And the guy goes, music traits will be perfect. I said, no. You're going to have to score the film. This was a producer who didn't know that film had key code, had frame numbers on it. He didn't know what frame rate was. He didn't know any of these basic. He was the producer anyway. So I was doing film 101 while I was trying to put this together. So I had to get 48 frames a second, 29.97, and 30 frames a second, all to run in sync. There wasn't any technology that did that. So I had to have people do it. Anyway, Luxor was the first real, I guess, digital project in film history. And it was only so it was $51 million, and I think that was 27 minutes of screen time total. All 3
Where
projects.
did this play?
Luxor Hotel
In the
in
hotel.
Vegas. 3 motion bases in the basement of the hotel. A show scan theater, and a IMAX theater. The IMAX was vertical image, like you were looking through a doorway, like it was filmed on a.
Right.
The show scan was like a live theater, and it looked like a live presentation. And I looked at that film for months in our screening room in the Berkshires, and it looked okay, but it wasn't real. And then when I went to Vegas to see the first time, the director, Arish, co-director, pushed a desk up in front of it to hook up to a desk that was in the scene to make it look like an extension. And my brain went, it's real. I was totally fooled. It was amazing.
And that was because of the quality of the video.
That was because it was showing at 48 frames a
Right.
second, and it was 70 millimeter, not video, 70 millimeter film. Right. The compositing was done digitally, but put back to film.
I see.
So the Luxor,
So it's
the
like,
motion-based
proxy.
ride, motion-based ride, same thing. It's a huge 35 millimeter loop, run at 48 frames a second. But all composited digitally.
Right.
But finished that. I went back to LA, and I was getting ready to move back to the East Coast. I was not going to live in Los Angeles anymore, and I got a call from Pacific Ocean Post. They were talking about going digital. They did mostly commercial work, mostly. And so they asked me to come in because they'd just done big digital stuff. And I said, they sort of went through, what are we going to do? What are we going to buy? What are the tools? And I said, Kodak's the only one. I mean, Kodak knows film, so they must know digital to make digital. Because in those days, your solution was go shoot film, go digital, post, output to film for release. There was no digital out, right? There was no digital, right? You originated on film because it looked rich and looked right? And always was trying to emulate the look of film. And so Cineon, which was Kodak's solution, basically takes all the grain out of the film, just makes it flat image-wise. It's painfully sharp. And then you do all your work, you do all your compositing, all your color correction, and then you put whatever film grain back in you want. So if you shot with fine grain, internal lighting days, and you went external daylight, the film grains are different. They crawl different.
Yeah.
You remove them, then you can make it anything you want. Make it daylight, make it nighttime.
And bringing more cohesion to the whole
Process,
process.
and more sharpness. You're not losing anything because you're adding up layer after layer of grain. There's no grain to add. It's not there. So anyway, Pacific Ocean Post, we did this whole thing. I told them all the stuff they needed, what they were going to spend, the whole reason. They said, "Is there anybody you know that can run a facility like this?" I said, "There's nobody qualified." They said, "What about you?" And I said, "Well, I'm the only person qualified right now, but I don't want to do it." And so they made me an offer that I couldn't refuse. And I said, "I'll give you 6 months to get you up and going." So we bought the Kodak Cineon. That was $2.1 million. A Genesis scanner, film recorder out, the whole 9 yards. Got to set up a facility. We also were combining it with discrete digital's flame, so they could do compositing, digital compositing, video. And composite, that no one had done that. So I had these big SGI computers, grinders to work everything. Anyway, so we did that for 6 months, and finally at the end, I just said, I got him a project, Independence Day, and said, "Knock yourself out," and walked away. Came east to work and ended up getting sucked back into a Doug Trumbull project at Mass Illusion in the Berkshires, and did that for a couple of years. And that was another one, 7 days a week, 18 hours a day. And on one Sunday, I got a call from someone that wanted to do a startup company doing solving visual effect problems, and with a startup company, developing new software for it. And 5 days a week, 8-hour days, local.
Regular job.
So I took it.
Well, it must be a little unnerving going from project to project, but the money was good.
You are a migrant chem slut. You work, you go where the jobs are.
Yes.
And most features last 9 months to a year, maybe, if you're lucky.
Yeah.
Most of them you're in production, it's going to be 6 weeks, and you're done. You're on to the next one. There is no, the studio system that keeps all the technician and craftsmen on, those are long gone.
Right.
You're sort of in when you're needed, out. Lucasfilm was good. It tried to keep a basic skeletal staff on. But the problem with Lucasfilm is if you went to work for someone else, you very seldom ever got invited back. You had sort of walked away, and they sort of took it as an affront, if you will, which is okay.
Yeah, but the Lucasfilm output was pretty sporadic. They worked on all kinds of different things with ILM, but when it comes down to Lucasfilms
Lucasfilm itself, ILM, yeah.
those are spread pretty far apart.
Well, George said one day the four of us were sitting out at the picnic tables having lunch, and Steve and Dwayne and myself and George. And George says, "You realize it's the four of us who pays everybody's salary, because the productions pay the fund. ILM didn't pay the freight at that time. It does. ILM got to the point where you submitted your script. If they approved of it, they might take the job, or they might not.
Right.
And I remember on Star Trek 3, I was the visual effects editor on Star Trek 3 at ILM, and there's a cloaking shot of the bird of prey doing a big turn and coming in. That's the first time you see it. It uncloaks. And I sent the shot to the cutting rooms, the live action in LA, and they sent me back the cut to show me how it worked. And they cut it into three pieces. And Dennis Mirren came by and he said, "What's that?" I said, "What's the cut?" The guy sent me a cut. He said, "They can't do that." I said, "What do you mean they can't do that?" "They can't take a shot of the bird of prey and cut it into 3 pieces." I said, "They can do anything they want. They paid for it. It's their shot. They can turn it upside down. They can use one frame and nothing all. It's theirs."
Yeah.
No, Dennis was upset. He was really,